All right, so to fully explain this James Wiseman thing, first of all, let me paint you a picture. Let me paint you a picture of what your boy was doing Friday. Because Thursday night was a little bit of a rough night. Me and the missus may have stayed out a little bit past our bedtime, maybe had a drink or two too many. And I was struggling most of the day Friday. And it got to about 3 o'clock, probably about 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern. The Auburn-Davidson game was going to start. And you know what I wanted? I just wanted a little Subway. I wanted to get a little Subway. I felt like Happy Gilmore. I just wanted my 6-inch meatball sub. I wanted to come home. I wanted to watch the game. I'm at Subway. I'm in line. I'm about to pay. And all of a sudden, my phone starts blowing up. And it's going bananas. I mean, one call after the other, after the other, after the other. I'm like, what is going on? And, of course, as you all know, James Wiseman, the projected number one pick in next year's NBA draft, the number one ranked high school player in America last year, freshman at Memphis, potential superstar, potential NBA superstar, was ruled ineligible by the NCAA. And I'm sitting there at Subway just trying to process everything, just trying to feel out everything, trying to figure out what's going on. And it was just insanity. And so we all know by now. Let me first kind of explain what happened, then I'll backtrack and kind of explain it, and then I'll give you the real details, the real stuff that you won't hear anywhere else. But as you know, James Wiseman suspended. I go on Periscope. I'm doing a Periscope. While I'm doing a Periscope, an injunction is served, and basically the courts have stepped in to basically give an injunction against the NCAA, allow James Wiseman to play on Friday night against Illinois Chicago. That injunction isn't going to hold up forever, and frankly, it really has no bearing on the NCAA at all. Like, if the NCAA continues to rule James Wiseman ineligible, then that win will not count against Illinois Chicago. That will eventually count as a loss, and Memphis will kind of look probably pretty stupid for playing them. But let me kind of just explain everything to people who are having trouble following the story or only know bits and pieces. And so it really basically starts about 3 or 4 years ago, right? So James Wiseman, even as a freshman and sophomore in high school, is emerging very quickly as one of the top-ranked high school players in his class. I mean, I remember my buddy Evan Daniels, he and I were working at Fox Sports at the time. I remember him telling me about James Wiseman 3, 4, 5 years ago when he was a freshman in high school and really emerging. Summer after his sophomore year, he really emerges, James Wiseman, as the guy in this class, as the guy with the most NBA potential number one pick down the road. No different than a Cade Cunningham in 2020, no different than an Evan Mobley, whatever. And so the summer before his junior year, he plays for Penny Hardaway's AAU program. And in doing so, they obviously have success. They obviously build a relationship. And the following fall, James Wiseman follows Penny Hardaway, who is at that time, this is now the fall of 2017 going into the 2018 school year. He follows Penny Hardaway to Memphis to play high school ball at Memphis. So number one player in the country, very simple to follow. Number one player in the country, high school player, or AAU, plays AAU with Penny Hardaway at the 14 Penny. The following year transfers to Memphis to play for Penny Hardaway in high school. Penny Hardaway is, again, a high school coach at that point. And even then, I mean, if you really care about college basketball and you really kind of follow the nuance, even then it was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, because the difference is, one, and listen, by the way, I'll never fault a player for wanting to play for a person the caliber of Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway had success as a high school coach before that, but more importantly, Penny Hardaway is a former NBA All-Star. I'm not going to blame a high school kid for wanting to play for a former NBA All-Star in high school and at the very least learn the ropes from that specific guy. I can't blame him. Listen, if Colin Cowherd 5 years ago, Colin's a friend of mine now, but if 5 years ago he wanted to take me under his wing for an internship in broadcasting and podcasting and radio, I'm not going to say no. So I get it from James Wiseman's perspective, but if you looked at it from the 30,000-foot view of NCAA rules, is this kind of sketchy under kind of the rules that exist in the NCAA? Yeah, it kind of was, because it wasn't as though James Wiseman, and to backtrack, James Wiseman's originally from Nashville, so it wasn't as though he was already in Memphis and he just was going to a different high school. He moved across the state specifically to play for Penny Hardaway, and the crazy part is they played at East High School. East High School is a public school, and from my understanding, and I'm not being critical, I'm not trying to make this a socioeconomic thing, my understanding is it's not even a particularly good high school. It's not like it's transferring to either an Oak Hill Academy or a Montverde or a private school or even a really good academic school. It was a public school in Memphis, and the only logical reason to transfer to said public school in Memphis is to play for its coach, Penny Hardaway, when you played for him the summer before. Again, I don't blame James Wiseman. If you have the chance to play for Penny Hardaway, I don't blame him for doing it. But obviously the question becomes, well, why would you do it? Or how does it happen? Or what's the stuff going on behind the scenes? Now, I even remember at the time there was this narrative of, James Wiseman's sister goes to school in Memphis, at the University of Memphis, and it would just make sense to be closer to the family. Listen, families don't move across the state to be closer to their kid in college. It doesn't happen. Unless, of course, there's ulterior reasons, and in this case, it was James Wiseman wanting to go play for Penny Hardaway. And again, for the last time, I don't blame him for wanting to play for Penny Hardaway. But still, even at the time, like I said, it didn't really feel right, and it brings us back to full circle for on Friday because Penny Hardaway obviously brings James Wiseman to Memphis. At the time, it felt sketchy. James Wiseman Penny Hardaway eventually gets the Memphis head coaching job in April of 2018. James Wiseman stays in Memphis to play his high school ball, and James Wiseman commits to the University of Memphis. And so we find out on Friday, this is what we find out. We find out that Penny Hardaway personally paid for James Wiseman's family to move to Memphis. And obviously they moved to Memphis. They claim it's to be closer to the sister, but the reality is it's to play for Penny Hardaway in high school. And eventually Penny Hardaway gets the college job, and of course he moves. Penny Hardaway moves. I'm getting tripped up. I'm going too fast here. Penny Hardaway gets the college job. James Wiseman goes there. Where it gets complicated is two things. One, by technicality, Penny Hardaway, because he has given the University of Memphis money, is considered a booster. And so that's where the NCAA jumps in and says, we kind of got to do something here because, one, you're a booster. So for people who say, this isn't a big deal, he should be allowed to play where he wants to play and play for who he wants to play for. Listen, we have these rules in place, and this is an egregious violation of the rules, no different than if some oil tycoon in Texas decides, I'm going to pay for the number one high school player in the country, to the number one quarterback to move from Georgia or Florida or Tennessee or Hawaii or wherever to play at Texas. I'm going to move him to Austin, and then he's going to commit to the University of Texas. It's no different. It's no different than if an Alabama car dealer reached out to Tua's family and moved Tua all the way down to Alabama to make sure that he played at Alabama. It's no different. And then, by the way, I see all the media freaking out about he's a booster, he's this, he's that. It's yeah, but he's also now the head coach. I mean, can you imagine? And this was one of my favorite parts was Memphis fans if he had committed to Kentucky, he'd be eligible right now. It's yeah, he would be eligible. You know why? Because the head coach of the University of Kentucky wouldn't have moved him across the state to Lexington to play at Kentucky or Duke or Kansas. Can you imagine if Mike Krzyzewski had personally out of his own checking account paid to bring Zion Williamson to Duke? That would be the biggest story in college sports. Same with John Calipari. Now, the difference is, and this is where it gets interesting, this is where it gets complicated, and this is where I'm going to tell you right now, point blank, I'm going to start to give you information that nobody else is going to give you. Where it gets interesting and where I think Memphis's ultimate argument is going to be to get James Wiseman eligible is very simple. Penny Hardaway was the high school coach. He was just doing the kid a favor. He was helping the family move to get closer to their daughter. He had no idea that he was eventually going to be the Memphis head coach. And to a degree, I think that's reasonably fair, and I think it's a half-decent argument. Because I do think common sense would say, dude, Penny Hardaway's a high school coach. There's no way he's going to know that Tubby Smith is going to crash and burn, and there's no way that he is going to know that Tubby Smith is going to get fired, which will allow him to get that job. That makes perfect sense, right? And so that's what Memphis's argument is going to be. He was a high school coach. He was helping a high school kid. He had no idea he was going to be a college coach. Here's where I don't buy it. Here is where the insider information comes in. Because to fully understand how Penny Hardaway got that job, this is what you need to know. You need to know kind of the political things that Penny Hardaway did behind the scenes to get that job. And then I'm going to get into some other political things that are even crazier. But the political things that Penny Hardaway did to get the job are very simple. Penny Hardaway, as part of being an AAU coach, he basically boxed in all the best players in Memphis under his umbrella. So, as I just mentioned, they played for Team Penny during the summer, which was his AAU program. They then played for his high school team during the high school season. And so you had a situation where if you wanted one of those players, any of the players, you had to go through Penny Hardaway. Because all the good players in Memphis were playing for Penny Hardaway all high school season long in high school ball, and then all AAU season long in AAU ball. And by the way, I'm not criticizing Penny Hardaway for that. That's what a lot of guys do behind the scenes. Now, he did it to an extreme level because he was the AAU coach and the high school coach. But listen, it's not uncommon for a high school coach to only let his high school kids play for an AAU program where there's kind of a symbiotic relationship, or vice versa. AAU coaches will send their players to a high school coach that they know they can trust. They know nobody else will get access to those players. It's unfortunate, but that's how things really work in college basketball. Penny Hardaway had access to these kids 365 days a year. And so while it's easy to say that there's no way that you could have known that Tubby Smith was going to get fired, here's the truth. Penny Hardaway put Memphis in an almost impossible situation where they had no choice but to fire Tubby Smith. Now, that's not to say that definitively there was no way that Penny Hardaway was going to get the Memphis job. But what Penny Hardaway basically did, whether he explicitly said it or whether it was unexplicitly said, was like, dude, Memphis, I don't care who the coach is, but certainly not this Tubby Smith guy. I don't like this Tubby Smith guy. But unless I'm the coach at Memphis, all these players are coming up and playing in my AAU program. They're playing in my high school program. And none of these guys are going to Memphis unless you name me the head coach or at the very least bring me on the staff. And I've heard differing things of whether Penny was interested in being an assistant with Tubby Smith, and Tubby just said no, which shame on Tubby Smith. That's kind of a dumb move in my personal opinion. Or whether he wanted the head coaching job from the beginning. But what happened was he put Memphis in an impossible situation where he said, you want the best players, you got to go through me. I don't know if he ever explicitly said that, but it was the thing that was kind of commonly known around Memphis. So imagine the position that Tubby Smith is in. Imagine the position that Memphis is in. To take it a different direction. Just let me explain it from a broader perspective. We all know, like Indiana, since Archie Miller has gotten that Indiana job, his number one priority, keep the best players at Indiana home. Well, imagine if every good player in Indiana played for the same high school coach and the same AAU coach, and that high school and AAU coach said, we're not giving any of us, none of our best players are going to the University of Indiana. Or the best players in LA, they're not going to UCLA. That puts the school in the position of like, man, if my guy can't recruit Indiana, my guy can't recruit LA, we're probably not going to win here. And so it's easy for Penny to say, well, how was I going to get the head coaching job? I was just a high school coach. I was just hanging out coaching AAU ball. But there were reasons to believe that Penny Hardaway was positioning himself to get the Memphis head coaching job, which is what makes this whole complicated, because that's what Memphis is going to say. Well, how could we know he was going to get the job? He was just helping out a high school kid. While Penny was very much positioning himself to get this job, and very much, listen, no one knows Penny's intentions except for Penny, and so I'm not going to not accuse him. But I will say it does make you more attractive. If you're trying to angle to get the Memphis job, it makes you a heck of a lot more attractive if you know you can bring the number one high school player in the country. And so I'm not saying he doesn't have a great relationship with James Wiseman. I'm not saying the family doesn't trust him. But there was also a lot to gain besides goodwill for Penny Hardaway to bring James Wiseman to Memphis. Makes you that much more appealing as a Memphis coach. Now, this is where it's going to get really interesting. This is where I'm going to give you information that nobody else has, because this is the fascinating part of the story to me. Why did this information come out now? Because Memphis is saying, and I think accurately, for people who don't understand the NCAA process, when a kid commits to a college, signs a letter of intent, they have to go through the NCAA clearinghouse. I talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago with N'Faly Dante at Oregon, but basically at that point, what you have to do is you go through the NCAA clearinghouse, and every player goes through it. Tyrese Maxey went through it. Cole Anthony went through it. Zion Williamson went through it. Football players go through it, whatever. And the NCAA basically looks at all your stuff and kind of figures out, like, is there anything that we need to be worried about here, right? So like in Folly Dante, I brought him up a few weeks ago. Well, that was a guy that made up a year's worth of high school in a couple months from another country, doesn't speak English. And again, I credit the kid. He's a hard worker. He seems like a really good kid. But the NCAA was kind of like, I don't know, man. There's something that doesn't really seem right here. And so James Wiseman apparently went through that clearinghouse process in May, was cleared by the NCAA, and then over the last couple weeks, something came up that the NCAA kind of was like, we better go back and look at this a little bit deeper, and that's where they found this information. This is where I think it gets really, 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 really interesting. Is I think it's no secret, right? Like Penny Hardaway had the number 1 recruiting class in the country last year. James Wiseman was kind of the star. There was a couple other players from Memphis, Malcolm Dandridge, DJ Jeffries, who was originally committed to Kentucky. They also recruited very well outside of Memphis. Precious Achiuwa, McDonald's All-American. Boogie Ellis was committed to Duke. But that's where it gets interesting to me. And this is where I was working the phones all day Friday, and I kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. Is that Penny Hardaway, in the process of putting together this recruiting class, think about what I just said. So first of all, before he even got the job, he pissed off Tubby Smith and all of Tubby Smith's supporters because they're all like, dude, and I don't know how many supporters Tubby Smith has, but like the old school coaches are like, dude, this guy just, he boxed out Tubby Smith out of his job and never gave Tubby Smith a chance to succeed, right? So you have Tubby Smith and his supporters not very happy with Penny Hardaway. But then think about what I said. Think about this. DJ Jeffries, originally committed to Kentucky, ends up decommitting, going to Memphis. Boogie Ellis, originally committed to Duke, decommits. Now, part of Boogie Ellis's decommitment was actually DJ Jeffries. They took a couple players at the same position, Khalil Whitney, but Boogie Ellis, same deal. Trey Jones decides to come back. Boogie Ellis decommits, but still was supposed to go to Duke. Precious Achiuwa, for most of his recruitment, was all over the place, but the final few weeks, it seemed like he was going to North Carolina. Ends up going to Memphis. Why do I bring all that up? Duke, Kentucky, Memphis. Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina. What do they all have in common? They're all blue bloods. They all have very powerful Hall of Fame coaches. And I want to make one thing clear here. I'm not saying that Penny Hardaway tampered to get those players. I'm not saying he cheated. I'm not saying he gave them extra benefits to come to Memphis. I'm also not saying that it was Duke, that it was Kentucky, that it was North Carolina that was the one that kind of said, hey, we got you better look a little closer to that James Wiseman recruitment. What I am saying, though, is this. In the process of building that number 1 recruiting class, Penny Hardaway pissed a lot of people off. He pissed a lot of people off. That's a lot of power behind the scenes that you pissed off. And I'm not saying it was definitively Duke, and I'm not saying it was definitively Kentucky, and I'm not saying it was definitively North Carolina. But you're talking about some of the major players behind the scenes in college basketball. We're talking about 4 Hall of Fame coaches if you include Tubby Smith, 4 national championship coaches if you include Tubby Smith, a lot of big people behind the scenes, and he pissed a lot of people off. And so to me, the question becomes, why did this come out? Somebody wasn't happy that Penny Hardaway was getting too good too fast. It's almost like Will Wade last year, right? Remember Will Wade? Number 1 recruiting class, and all of a sudden you start hearing stuff, and stuff gets leaked to Yahoo, and stuff gets leaked here, and it's like, Will Wade, no. You're doing a little too good, a little too fast here, and we don't like it. And I think it was the same thing with Penny Hardaway. You're getting a little too good, a little too fast, and you took a kid from Duke, and you took a kid from Kentucky, and you took a kid who everybody thought was going to North Carolina, and you got the number 1 player in the country, and you pissed off the former head coach who was a national champion. Yeah, you're getting a little too good too fast here. And so I think somebody who had insider information, and by the way, I should backtrack. I had heard behind the scenes, and I think a lot of people who covered college basketball behind the scenes, that Penny personally helped the Wiseman family get to Memphis. And apparently it wasn't a big secret because Penny even admitted to that the other day. But I think somebody from either one of these powers or a power broker was like, dude, NCAA, you got to look a little bit more into this. Because come on, man. Like, number one player in the country. And I also think, again, it's a little bit of a credit to Penny. Got a little too good, a little too fast, ruffled a little too many feathers a little too quickly. And to take it one step further, I'll say this. I do think, and this is in defense of Penny, I think he's been a really good coach. And I think there are people behind the scenes that were a little like, dude, if this thing works with James Wiseman this year, and this thing works with Boogie Ellis this year, and he's already kind of tampering to get players, and they go to like the Elite Eight, and James Wiseman ends up as the number one pick in the draft, and Precious Achiuwa is number 9 overall, and Boogie Ellis is a first-round pick. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, I don't like this thing could start snowballing, and Memphis could be a real thorn in our side. And so somebody behind the scenes, I just believe, gave some information to the NCAA that made them change this ruling. Now, what'll be interesting is what happens going forward. And I'll tell you this, full disclosure, I did a Periscope on Friday. Didn't have all the information. My opinion's changed a little bit. I said, I don't know how Wiseman ever plays again. I don't know how Penny coaches. But a couple things. I think that Memphis is going to try really, really, really hard to paint this as a picture of a high school coach trying to do good by the kid. He has no idea that he's ever going to be the head coach of the University of Memphis, and that whatever. And then James Wiseman will volunteer to pay back the money, and we'll see what will happen from there. I saw Jeff Goodman actually put out kind of a pretty good tweet where there was a player at BYU a few years ago. He took about $10,000 worth of money, and he ended up paying it back, and I think he was suspended 9 games or 12 games or something like that. So I said in my Periscope, there's no way he plays. There's no way Penny coaches going forward. Listen, they're gonna play the innocence card of like, I had no idea. And like, the family will figure out a way to cut a check, give back some of the money. And I'm not sold that James Wiseman is ruled permanently ineligible. But what I will also say, Memphis did themselves no favors by playing him on Friday. And I get it. Everybody on Twitter wants to be so cool and F the NCAA and they should and this and that. Well, one, the NCAA is not going to be happy that they're playing him. But two, I'm also going to add this. This is such a unique, different story than anything that I can ever remember in this sense. And I'll tell you why. So, by playing James Wiseman when he's already ruled ineligible, this is unprecedented, right? And I saw this on Twitter, and I think people are getting this very confused. People are saying, well, if you play a player and he's ruled ineligible, you have to forfeit the wins. That's true, but that ain't what's going on right now. This is not what traditionally happens. What traditionally happens is let's go back to LSU for a second. So this report comes out that Will Wade, big-ass offer, huge-ass offer to Javonte Smart. LSU ends up sitting Javonte Smart for a game before the NCAA has even had a chance to investigate. They go through whatever financial records, and they feel comfortable saying, the NCAA isn't going to find anything, we're going to play him. That's not what happened here, though. In that case, the NCAA would still have to investigate Javonte Smart, and then if they did find anything illegal, then LSU would be punished for playing Javonte Smart. What happened here, James Wiseman has already been ruled ineligible. He's already been ruled ineligible. In the Javonte Smart case, in Silvio D'Souza, in those cases, there was a report came out that something may have happened and they held him out for precaution. Javonte Smart, before he was ever investigated, they held him out to be safe. James Wiseman's already been investigated. And so my understanding, and I could be wrong, and I've actually reached out to the NCAA to try to get clarification, is because he is ineligible, unless he is ruled eligible at some point, any game that he plays is going to have to be forfeited, because this isn't taking a precautionary step and holding him out, or this isn't, waiting for the facts to come out. The facts have apparently already come out, and he is ineligible. And so what I'm confused by is, are they forfeiting these games in real time because of the fact that he's an ineligible player? And then will the NCAA, so the NCAA retroactively takes away losses. In this case, will the NCAA retroactively add wins if Wiseman is proved to be eligible? I don't know. I don't have a good answer. And that's what's so fascinating to me. And this is what I want to get clarified. I'm on ESPN.com right now. It says Memphis is 2-0. But they played an ineligible player against UCI. So technically they should be 1-1. And so that's what's fascinating. But I will say in the bigger picture, it does just come down to very simply exactly what I said, is that there is nothing quite like this. Memphis is going to fight it, but we've never seen anything like this in college basketball in the sense where a player was already ruled ineligible and you continue to play him. And I'll say this, I think everyone thinks it's so brave from Memphis and screw the NCAA. I don't think it's that cool, man, because I'll tell you why. If I'm one of the other players that's been working hard all summer and busting my butt, and I'm trying to get to the NCAA tournament, and my coach is playing an ineligible player, and we're going to have to forfeit all those wins, and we're not going to be eligible for the tournament in March, I'm pretty pissed. And by the way, you know who else I'm pissed off is? If I'm a coach in this conference, and I got to coach against this guy, and I might lose my job because I lose to him twice when he's playing an ineligible player. And this is the part that bothers me. Right? The media is like, oh, James Wiseman, it's not fair. He should be able to play. No, you know who it's unfair to? It's unfair to the AAC coach that has to go against James Wiseman twice and might lose his job if they lose to Memphis because that coach isn't willing to cheat for players. It's unfair to say Kentucky, if Kentucky plays Memphis in the Final Four and their season ends because they weren't willing to cheat to get James Wiseman, they weren't willing to pay money to move his family all over the country. Same with Duke, same with Carolina, same with anybody. Kansas, who was recruiting James Wiseman. So I just bring this up because these narratives are such bull you-know-what. I'm trying to stay calm. I know there's kids in the car. This is a family show. But like this idea that it's not fair to James Wiseman. No, it's not fair to the teams that have to go up against him that weren't going to cheat for him. But I'll be fascinated to see what happens. I'll be fascinated to see if the school steps in or if the conference steps in, because the conference also has a stake too here. Because if Memphis is playing an ineligible player and Memphis is going to have to forfeit all these wins, you think the conference wants Memphis playing Cincinnati and Wichita State and Houston and UConn and giving them all losses and potentially costing those teams tournament bids? No. So I do think somebody's going to step in. I do think until this is resolved, James Wiseman is eventually going to sit. Maybe he'll play against Oregon. I do think eventually he is going to sit, though. I'm not saying it's totally fair to the kid, but these are the rules. And you break the rules, you have to be punished for them. But I do think that, first of all, that's the behind-the-scenes stuff. And I'd add to it that I do think that Memphis' argument is going to be to the NCAA. Like, dude, this was a guy helping a kid. He had no idea he was ever going to be the head coach at the University of Memphis. I don't know if it'll fly with the NCAA. I do hope they punish him adequately. I hope they punish Penny. I hope they punish James Wiseman. But listen, also selfishly, I kind of want to see James Wiseman play, but we can't act as though rules weren't broken. All right. Whew. Great episode today. Guys, I told you at the top, like, there are some days where it's like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. There are other days where it's like, dude, AT is on fire. And your boy was on fire. That is all. I got to run. I got to get to the airport like I told you at the top of the show. Please make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. You do it on iTunes, Podcast Addict, Podbean, TuneIn Radio, Spotify. Rate and review the show. You better give me a good rating after today. I just delivered an hour of scintillating, juicy, gossipy content. This is one of the best shows that I've ever done. Also, rate and review the show, as I just said, 5 stars. Follow me on Instagram. The least you can do, click that like button on Instagram after everything I'm doing for you. Aaron_Torres_sports_podcast. And of course, Aaron Torres podcast questions @gmail.com. I'll be back later this week. Probably talk more college hoops this week. So much to get into. James Wiseman and beyond. Washington was awesome. My boy Cole Anthony was awesome. I'm awesome. That's all for today. I'll be back later this week.